Say hello to the night. We're lost in the shadows. This is an interview for Peep-magazine. We're here with Bardbone Custom Paint. We're at the top of Shields Road. He's got an exhibition with his work called Creature Cult Art Show. We're here with him now. We're sitting with him. What I failed to mention is Bardbone Custom Paint is a professional airbrush artist and custom painter from Newcastle. We're going to take the time, we're going to have a look through all this work, and yeah man, so Bardbone Custom Paint.
No problem, nice to meet you.
Brilliant. We've been aware of some very suspicious vampire activity in the area. Do you know anything about this?
Right, you get a few types in South Shields maybe, so you can call vampires, like, I suppose, yeah.
Have you met any vampires yourself?
A few in Whitby and that, yeah. Romania and the Carpathian Mountains and that.
Really?
Been about, like, that's for sure.
Do you wanna elaborate on it?
Just, I don't know. There used to be a place in Manchester, it was called the Colosseum, and there was a really cool shop in there, and it was called Bats. And had these, like, goths that used to work there, and they were blatantly, like, proper vampires. They were in, like, this proper vampire society and stuff like that. It's quite interesting, but yeah.
Have you always been interested in the macabre and vampire-esque nostalgia kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of 80s kind of cult classics I grew up on were massive inspiration. And I mean, one of my favourite films, you know, like The Lost Boys and that. How can you not like that film, you know? The fashion, just the whole concept of it all was, like, really well done. And I think even now a lot of these newer films like Twilight and stuff, they're just kind of pathetic vampires, you know. I think it's hard to, like, outdo that film, you know. Just with all, even the practical effects and things like that, it was quite simplistic, but it worked really well, you know.
Yeah, it still kind of stands the test of time, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah. I think a lot of that 80s stuff kind of does as well. And it's got, like, a really nice charm to it, you know, that I think that's kind of missing from a lot of films and stuff now. Everything's just kind of like watching sort of a video game now, you know, with the amount of CGI and stuff they use in it. I just don't think it's... I think it doesn't have that charm, and it doesn't have that grace that the practical effects always had, really, you know.
Got you. We're going to go way back to The Devil's Castle, 1896, German Expressionism, 1920, Nosferatu, the Somnambulist, German Expressionism, the introduction to sound and music between the 1930s to the 40s, Dracula, Frankenstein, Night of the Living Dead coming up to the 1960s, David Cronenberg. And I'm just wanting to know, what films or horror movies introduced you to this art and sculpture?
I think it was like a mixture of a lot of stuff, quite a lot of claymation and stuff. I was really obsessed with, like, animation and stuff when I was younger, where I'd even, like, make my own, like, claymation videos with, like, a really old stop motion camera. And it was stuff like that I got into, and that kind of just rubbed off on us more, and I just got more obsessed with it. And that in turn sort of got us a lot into the sculpture side of things, so I would just kind of recreate a lot of the creations I'd see from, like, old 80s, cheesy old, like, 80s horror stuff, like, you know, and 70s stuff, things like that. Even some of the really old horror hammer stuff. A lot of that was a massive inspiration, you know. Music, you name it, the list goes on, you know. Anything that just really, really inspired us, I would obsess over.
Yeah. What about Cronenberg and the originator of body horror and exploring body transformations? Has he been a...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first time I saw American Werewolf in London, just the transformation sequence on that, I was like, it's still one of the best, and I was like, how did they even create this, like, you know? And that was like pre-way any of this CGI stuff, you know. So
are you going to say CGI shit there?
Sorry. But yeah, just I think stuff now is just done to death way too much with CGI. And I prefer to practice a lot of the old traditional methods. Like, I'm still kind of stuck in that way. I mean, I can transfer to other stuff, but, you know, I just like the whole practical side of that rather than actually creating something that isn't digital. You know, it's actually just created, you know, with your own bare hands, basically. Yeah.
Evil Dead 2 relied quite heavily on VFX and artistic ability to carry the film. Would you say there is something more real about VFX back then opposed to CGI now?
Yeah, I think over time it just grew even a bigger following, innit? And even now it's like massive now how big some of these old B movies were, you know what I mean, became, and how much of a following they became. And I just think, like, I think with a lot of the practical side of effects as well, it's because the stuff was actually there as well, it was physically there, and people had to build it. It was so much work and everything was like involved, and that just always fascinated us. I was like, I want to be like these guys. Like, how do these guys make this stuff, you know? And I just was like, okay, I need to teach myself how to do this, you know, from a really young age, basically.
Yeah, of course, and I think there's a lot to be said as well about, say for instance, you've heard of a film, The Illustrated Man, the original. Oh, have you not heard of that? It's basically, the actor is Rob Steiger, and he plays like a bit of a whore, but I mean it was maybe done in like the 50s, I think. Right, yeah. And it's basically called, it's been adapted from a book, and it's called The Illustrated Man, and it's basically, the guy has tattoos all over his body, and he bumps into someone in the outback, and the guy says, "Don't look at me tattoos because they'll start telling you your future." And every time he talks about them, the guy, it's a fascinating film. Every time he talks about these tattoos, it goes back into a short film about the future, the present, the past. But my point is, I
like a lot of that stuff, like a lot of sci-fi and things to do with time travel, and that's really interesting. And even like fantasy stuff, like films like Legend, the Ridley Scott film. With Tim Curry played like the Lord of Darkness, and that was like such a huge inspiration to a lot of my artwork at the time. Just the prosthetics on the devil thing were unbelievable. Like,
just like I was saying, I think there's a lot to be said about when they were doing, because do you know when you get the director's cut, and then the director kind of starts chatting about how we made it. Well, I think there's a massive difference between a team of people working on something opposed to one guy in front of a computer on CGI doing this and that. And then the Illustrated Man, there was a whole team, and they were physically drawing the tattoos on the guy. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't say that now. They would just probably pop that on. Yeah,
it was would have been like months and months of work and stuff. And I think that's what, like, in this city as well is important. That people should work together more, you know, as like a team, and put like their egos aside, and you know, because you can create something a lot more powerful if everyone like joins together and, you know, creates something unreal, you know, like a big movement basically.
Yeah. Do you feel though with your work it's like it's kind of a lonely art? Because if you don't do it, it doesn't get done.
It can be at times, yeah. I mean, I've had times where I've just been stuck in my studio and stuck on my drawing board, you know, and sometimes you do feel like you're kind of chained to it a bit, you know, when you've got certain amounts of like deadlines or whatever, you know. It can get quite a lot, like, you know, but generally I normally move past that and just try and stay focused as you can in it, and have that drive, you know, to create as much interesting stuff as you can, stuff that's going to inspire people, really, you know what I mean? So yeah.
With specialising in the macabre, do you feel it difficult sometimes to switch off and then to close your eyes? Do you still see those imagery? Do you still see the imagery when you close your eyes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when I've been working on some like a piece for like months on end, Like I've just recently finished like a sculpture piece that's like a mashup from TheThing and Regan from The Exorcist. And I know when I'd been working on that a lot, just staring at the faces, I just basically had Regan's face like imprinted in my brain for like days on end. So it was quite hard to like get that image out of my mind and just chill out and relax a bit, you know.
I mean, that film still kind of stands the test of time.
It definitely does, yeah. I mean, I know when it come out back in the day, there was people passing out and things like that in the cinema when they went to see it and stuff. So,
I mean, that was a cutting edge horror that for the day. There was people running out the cinemas and everything.
Well, there's a lot of things as well about The Exorcist, like that's kind of mysterious that happened on the actual film set as well. Like some of the film set burnt down, and the room where they had Regan in just didn't burn at all, which is kind of a bit unusual, you know. But the whole rest of the set completely burned down, and that was the only like set that was left where Regan was, which is a bit spooky, like if you ask me. But it just adds to the coolness of the movie, really, I guess.
I think I've got the director's cut of that one as well. How it was talked about how lights came down when they were making some scene and it actually killed someone on.
There's loads of like strange things, like a couple of people died on set and stuff, and it's like that Poltergeist film as well. There was a lot of weird things happening with that, which is another epic classic film, I would say.
I mean, you always hear about these things happening on these when the film's about the occult or something, or about the supernatural.
Yeah, I know with Poltergeist it was because they used actual dead, like real skeletons in one of the scenes, where she's like in the swimming pool or something, and so apparently that kind of sort of cursed the film a little bit, you know, which is quite unusual. But
have you experienced anything yourself?
I have actually, yeah.
All right, cool.
I know when I was younger, I've lived in certain properties and had things like poltergeist and stuff like that, and I lived in a friend's house, and I just kind of thought he was nuts, and he was like, no, there's like an old lady ghost here, like, and he used to have a dog, and it used to like sit at the bottom of the stairs and like growl at the top of the stairs and things, and like weird things like plates flying out of cupboards and stuff, and I was just like, what? Believe in a lot of the paranormal kind of stuff, like, yeah, it's just really interesting, a lot of it, you know.
Do you know what still kind of sticks in my head is Salem's Lot, where the young kid comes to the window. That's imprinted in my brain.
A massive inspiration to a lot of my work is definitely a lot of Rob Zombie stuff, you know. I was always quite into the Beavis and Butthead stuff, and that animation scene where he's like tripping on the peyote and that. I just thought that the visuals and just his imagination's like crazy, and now he obviously does a lot more horror stuff now, like House of Thousand Corpses and things like that. I definitely like all the effects he creates, you know, because he still uses a lot of the old classic practical techniques and that, which I think's really cool.
Oh, right, brilliant, mate. It's actually great to see someone actually using an airbrush. You know, opposed to people just sitting in front of a computer doing CGI stuff or Photoshop stuff. And how did you get into using the airbrush as something that you've always wanted to use?
Well, that's a really good point, what you're saying about like the airbrushing. A lot of people tend to use a lot of digital stuff now, you know, it's really massively digital paintings and stuff. So like airbrushing kind of now is a bit of a dying art form, you know. But as for like getting into it, I've just always drawn since I was like a little kid, since I could basically hold a pencil, really. And then I would always like just paint stuff normal with like brushes. And then I got like some cheapy kind of Chinese copy sort of airbrushes and just messed around with that, like doing backgrounds and stuff. And then just practiced from that, really, and just never stopped doing it. I kind of just really liked how it felt, you know what I mean? It just felt really right, like when I was creating with it.
Yeah, brilliant. Because do you use ink? Because I actually used to use one years ago, and I couldn't afford the ink because it was quite. I'm talking
expensive. Yeah, I mean, I use a variation, a lot of Cratex paint, different ones, Vallejo, but I do use inks for like certain transparencies and stuff. If I want to create things like that, like then I'll use inks or just semi-opaque kind of or semi-transparent different stuff like that. I mean, there's different ones you can get as well. A lot of ones for like horror effects. Like Createx do a really good Bloodline series, and I use mainly a lot of eye-water airbrushes, which are basically pretty much the best on the market. I would say from all the airbrushes I've tried over the years, I would say definitely eye-water's the ones to use. Like
Cool, because I mean, back in the day, I used to have a Badger.
Yeah, I still that's how I started when I started building up my equipment and decided to I'll splash out, get a bit of a better airbrush. I got a couple of Badgers and stuff like that because I knew they did quite good detail. So I'm a major detail freak. So
I mean, I'm on the page where you're there, like, because I used to have one for years myself, and but like I say, I couldn't use the ink; it's too expensive. And then I started to use gouache paint, and then I was mixing the gouache down. But then in turn, the needle would get blocked a lot. You had to clean the needle, pull the needle out, all the rest of it. What are your go-to tools?
Mainly a lot of my airbrushing. I do a lot of pigment liner illustration pieces, like kind of dot worky. Sculpting, obviously my sculpting materials, so my hands and various sculpting tools I use. I'd have to show you really. There's thousands of different types. But yeah, predominantly, I mean, I like to mix it up with some pieces. It just depends how I feel or what kind of vibes I'm getting off the piece I'm creating at the time, you know what I mean? So
how do you decide on a piece? When you think about it, you formulate it in your brain. Do you watch a couple of films and think, I'm going to do that?
Possibly, yeah. Sometimes it can be a film, or I'll see a piece of artwork and then I'm just like, oh, right, I'm inspired. And then that just gives me a nice idea. Or I can just be sitting, just lying about on my bed, and ideas generally just pop into my head, I try and outdo myself with every piece I do. I try and top it if I can, or try and create a masterpiece if I can,
And I think what we haven't touched on as well is your kind of drawing skill, your skills in pointillism and illustration and stuff. I've seen one that caught my eye. I think, could it be from The Running Man when his head splits?
Total recall, mate. 2 weeks, when he's wearing that woman's head comes apart and stuff. Classic. Yeah, epic film, man. That's another massive inspiration, that film. Just all the weird characters and stuff like that in it, Things like that really inspire us, Just new and sort of fresh ideas. I mean, I know that's an old film now, but the ideas at the time were just way out there kind of shit, you know what I mean?
Can I ask what is the process of getting I can get my head around how you paint it, but how do you get the actual heads, the sculptures? Where does that come from? Are you sculpting them yourself? Are you using a 3D printer or what?
Sometimes I will sculpt them myself, and sometimes I'll just buy a blank, basically. It just depends how I feel or how much time I've got and things like that. But I find I'll generally sculpt a lot with it's a monster clay. It's an oil-based sort of clay that never kind of cures, So I'll make a mother sculpt of that and then basically coat it in silicone and then make a cast out of resin from that. But I am a good question about the 3D print, and I'm going to start moving more into that sector as well. But mix that as well with traditional sculpting, so I can mash up, kind of sculpt, I can print stuff and I can sculpt stuff and mix it together, just to create something really unusual, you know what I mean?
Have you thought about going into custom painting cars and tanks and bikes and all this?
Yeah, I mean, I've done quite a lot of bikes in the past. It just varies with that. I've done vans, you name it. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff I've been asked to paint, you know what I mean? But I'll paint it. It's good. I'm trying to move in as well to more the electronic music side of things as well. as a spin-off from the guitars I used to paint a lot. I used to paint a lot of like custom airbrush guitars. To name a few, I did like some quite big band from New Orleans and that. I did like a Jaws guitar, and he's like signed to a major record label like Century Media and that. Went out on tour with them and things like that, so that was crazy.
Do you actually?
The lifestyle gets a bit mad. Like, I mean, it's calmed down a bit these days, but you've got to be careful not to get swept up in all the crazy lifestyle of painting bikes and guitars. Yeah, you know, it's the people you meet as well. Like, you just meet some amazing characters, like different clients and stuff.
And could you maybe talk about your signature pieces, like the process and about how you done this and that? So, off the top of my head, can we talk about the image from TheThing?
From TheThing, yeah. Well, that's a massive inspiration for me, like, definitely. So I kind of made like a bit of a mashup kind of sculpture. Is that what you're talking about? The Regan, it's like an Exorcist and TheThing.
TheThing, what's upside down? Is that
the spider head? The Norris spider head. That's the one. Yeah, just that scene from that. I was like I just basically made a silicone sculpt of it, you know. Kind of had a little bit of a head sculpt that I'd made that was a face cast that sort of looked a bit like him. And then I had to just sculpt onto that and just kind of change the form a little bit and play around with it and like add like ripped bits out of its neck and things like that, you know. Just like mess about with it really, but yeah.
And then there's the Regan. Is it the double heads? What's it in?
Like, you know, the split face off TheThing, so it's like a mixture from that and Regan as well. But the inspiration from that just come from me love of both the films, really, and just like weird like creatures and that like John Carpenter and that used to create that were just like total nightmare fuel, basically. But yeah, I mean, a lot of them are like months and months worth of work, you know. So you've got to have stupid amounts of like patience, especially with like airbrushing, you know, just to get stuff before, like, to get it to please the eye, you know. It takes a lot of my process is just gradually building up all the layers of paint, you know, different transparencies and things like that, just to give it the kind of look that I'm after, you know. It's quite hard to kind of explain, really, you know. And I did a few, like a RoboCop versus Terminator. I don't know if people remember the old Mega Drive game. So I thought, I fancy doing something off that, you know, we'll have a bit mash-up, have them having a bit of a battle and stuff, like Ed 209 and the Hunter Killers and stuff like that, yeah. Just like Jim Cameron, like, amazing. Even the way he does stuff now, I think even with CGI, it's pretty high-tech, some of the stuff he's doing now, you know. Even a lot of the CGI stuff, he's like, I know the new Avatar film, he's kind of broke new ground on some new technology that we're using. We're doing some CGI stuff underwater and things like that. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things.
Oh yeah, about the DJ.
I plug my mate Connor as well, Kavik. He does a lot of dark techno and industrial music, so he's going to get some really heavy vibes going tonight, like. So yeah, it's just going to be some nice, cool, horror-themed, scary-sounding music to complement the artwork, basically.
Hi mate, I wish you the best of luck, and I really admire your work.
Really nice meeting you, mate, and it's been nice to do an interview and have a bit of chat about a little bit of the process. I mean, I could be here for days, you know, with the process. So. And I don't want to give all my trade secrets away, like.
You'll go to the grave with them.
Oh, definitely, yeah. No, maybe if I have a kid one day, I'll pass it down. The next bad bone in line.
Absolutely brilliant, and really good to meet you.
Thanks very much, man.